Earlier, I was thinking about what can I do to make good content for my audience? What does my audience need to be paying attention to right now that I think that they ought to be paying attention to? And this is something that struck me was how we need to be very diligent about how we communicate with people going forward and how people are communicating with us. There's a lot of people online that are very disrespectful towards one another. And it's not just to me, it's to other people, other content creators, other accounts in general, the whole shebang. People are way too comfortable with disrespecting others and being toxic. It's really bizarre. And I was afraid this was going to happen, I was afraid that this is where society would be ending up because there's so much potential with social media. There's so much potential with technology. And there's so much that we could be doing to live in spirit and truth that we are just not doing. And when you're on this path, when you are on the path of the narrow way and the path of the narrow truth, when you understand that things are not so simple and yet they're very simple, life is a paradox. And we could debate paradoxes all day long, but so many people are just so focused on needing to be right more than they are trying to understand what's actually happening. They'll resort to name calling and ad hominems and such. And I think that what I really want to do is make it known to people that you don't have to participate in these kinds of discussions. They're trying to get a reaction out of you, and the best thing that you can do is laugh at them. If they're really trying to provoke anger in you, you can just laugh at them, and they'll go away on their own. But it's almost like this is a byproduct of the failure of the education system. This is a byproduct of the failure of the spiritual understanding that people have. People just are not in tune with who they authentically are. And this is what I was afraid of that I was going to see happening was we have all this potential and all this knowledge available. Again, we've had the sum of man's knowledge at our fingertips for over a decade now. We've had the internet for almost 3 decades, if not longer, a little bit longer for most people, right? But there was many people that thought that social media is never going to take off the way that it did. People used to think that cell phones didn't take off the way that it did. And now AI is right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. It's here, but there's going to be a rise of cult-like God worshiping toward AI. And people are going to be using AI for their own benefit. They're going to be trying to use artificial intelligence to make them money, to build certain things. And I'm already seeing it online. I'm already seeing it. Like on X, for example. I can see on X who's using AI in their replies and who's not, because the way the algorithm works on X is that the more you respond to people and the more you reply and the more people engage back with you and the more people are spending more time on your stuff, the algorithm's going to favor you, so to speak, right? Because you're being more social. So that algorithm rewards you for being social. So many people are going to get caught up in the algorithm that they're going to try to use AI to their benefit. And I've already seen this happening. Like there are already AI grifters on X and YouTube. You see anonymous accounts on YouTube and some of these anonymous accounts are providing good information. Absolutely. But some of them are they're just rephrasing everything everybody else has said. And they do this by literally plugging in a script to AI and just saying, writing the prompt as rephrase this. The key that you're going to have to understand going forward is how to discern what's real and what's not. This is going to be the big kahuna that I want to discuss in this video. How do you discern what is real and what is not real? How do you discern what is authentic and what is a snake and what is fake? Because if it's not real, it's going to be fake. It's going to be this counterfeit product. It's not going to be something that's authentic and real and true. But the thing is how do you discern this? How are you going to discern this? Especially when you have people screaming at you or mocking you online. Like, the level of disrespect that I've seen throughout my entirety on social media over the past couple years. I've only been serious about X for like a month and a half to 2 months. I tried to like do a little bit here and there for the last 6 months on X, but didn't take it seriously until the last like month and a half or so. And now I'm seeing the true benefits and the potentialities there. But I'm also seeing with YouTube how there are still so many people on YouTube that are just recycling content. And they're the women that you'll see, the grifters. I'm not saying all women are grifters, and I'm not saying all men are grifters either, but there are a lot of men and women that use sexuality to their advantage to get you to stay on their content page and such. Think about Instagram. Instagram is essentially just fake. Like, it's a bunch of fake people trying to live fake lives. They're in debt. They're looking great on the outside, but then they're highly in debt. They don't know where they're going in life. They're isolated because of them making content. They've sold their souls because they're making content. And how do you sell your soul? Like, what happens when people sell their souls making content? Well, they sell their products that aren't theirs. They do other things that are not in line with who they really are. They basically allow their souls to be sabotaged for no reason, really, apart from a little bit of material gain. But here's the thing. Those who can see that material will fail them in the end, like it will not satiate their soul, they who see that will be able to recognize and begin to seek the Most High God. Because then they're going to see like, well, shoot, that's not it. Like, this is not it. Like, I've got all this stuff, but I don't have myself. And that's something that I saw in other people growing up. Like, I saw a lot of people that were well off. They weren't rich, but they were pretty well off. And I thought, man, these people have everything. But they don't have anything within themselves. They don't have themselves at all. Like, they're slaves to the things that they have. And this kind of goes in line with the Tyler Durden quote from Fight Club, where he says, the things that you own end up owning you, right? And that's very much the case. It's very much true. And a lot of people are not witnessing the true extent to where they have sold themselves. And you know, this is where atheists really just get it wrong. You know, atheists just are really off the mark. And it's funny because I say this as an atheist in the past, and I know that some people might think that, well, because I've converted to following Christ, you know, converted. I don't even want to say like converted seems like the wrong word. It's just, I made the choice. Like, God gave me the choice to follow him or not. And I chose to follow him. I didn't really convert to anything. I just saw the truth and realized it. Like, I experienced it. There's a difference between knowing the truth and experiencing the truth. And that's what I'm afraid of, is a lot of these people are just not going to be able to experience the truth because they're so sucked into the digital world. They're so sucked into the elusive reality that they're holding up as a paper tiger, but it's not at all true. And so how do we have the discernment then? Well, what we have to recognize is whenever we are disrespecting others, we are also disrespecting ourselves. And so the quickest way to discern whether or not something is true is whether or not you're doing a fair critique of an idea and not just calling a person like by whatever, like they're just ad hominem attacks. Because I never, like, as a rule of thumb for myself, and I'm not saying you have to do this, but as a rule of thumb for myself, I aim to never call people a derogatory name. And the reason for this is because I want to identify the behavior. Let's say, for example, this person may be experiencing something that this person's going through in which their behavior is making them act bitter and resentful and malice, like filled with malice, etc. I'm not going to call that person a bitch just because I think so. Even if I do think so, I'm not going to call them that. I'm going to say, you're acting like a bitch. That's what I'm going to say. Because I want to identify the behavior. I don't want to attach that thing to the person. Because that's just what I think is going to be the best course of action. And I'll call people out if they're being hypocritical or anything like that, because that's what Jesus did. But I'm not going to really try to force anybody into believing anything that they don't really want to even have a conversation about to begin with. Like, that's the cool thing about following Christ is you don't really need to convince anybody. That's what a lot of atheists will say. They'll be like, convince me. It's like, why do I need to convince you? I'm not, like, you're the one that's saying something doesn't exist. So, like, you're the one that's kind of supposed to be saying how it doesn't exist, right? Anyway, that's the point. And, you know, even when I was an atheist, I understood that. But still, I can also understand why an atheist would want me, for example, to convince them that Jesus exists or Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And it's like, but I don't need to. I don't need to convince anybody of anything, and I'm free. I know that. And then they'll say, well, but what are you free from? And it's like, well, I'm free from spiritual death. I'm free from spiritual death, and I'm free from living in sin. I'm able to control my urges. I'm able to control myself. And if you don't want to use the word sin, it's like, well, then I'm free from falling victim to that which is wrong for my well-being, or from intentionally hurting others because I feel wronged. That's a good way to put it, and a practical way to put it, if you don't want to use the word sin there, because I know that sometimes religious vocabulary can turn people off to ideas. But this is what I'm afraid of, is that people are going to be so caught up in the semantics, or not caught enough up in the semantics to understand what's actually being said. And you know what else I've noticed is that there's like a breaking point on the right side of politics. Has anybody else noticed this? How there's almost like emerging from, it's not like a far right fascist, it's more like a far right, how do I describe this? It is almost woke. It is almost woke. It's like the mirror image of wokeness, but they're like riding people's, how do I say this? Sophisticated, in a sophisticated way. They are massaging people's egos in a way that doesn't really make sense. You know, they're just, oh yeah, like it's kind of bizarre, man. It's kind of bizarre. And then you see people on the right that are saying, you know, this isn't right. I don't know if this is healthy. For example, I just saw a little bits and pieces of the Douglas Murray, and I think his name's Dave Smith or something. It's another comedian on Joe Rogan. And I didn't watch the whole thing, so I don't want to make a clear, concise conclusion or anything like that. But, they seem to really disagree about certain things in regard to Israel. And, the comedian that Douglas Murray was talking to, Douglas Murray is a journalist, by the way, British journalist, and I think Douglas Murray's done a lot of good work, but I had to say, I really disagreed with what he was saying in the Joe Rogan episode, but I didn't really agree with what Dave was saying either, the other comedian. I hope that's his name. So I found myself understanding both sides, but at the same time, not really leaning toward either. I was definitely seemingly on my own ground, because what Douglas Murray was saying was that, we need to have the experts. The experts need to be talking about this. And I thought to myself, that sounds a lot like trust the science to me. And we all know where trust the science came from. The liberals, by the way, if anybody doesn't know. And then Dave, though, was saying that he was making a lot of judgments and about Israel, and I won't really give my full take on Israel in this video, but he made an interesting point. But I thought to myself, why is it so cool to hate on Israel and the Jews right now? Why is it so cool to do this? What is happening exactly? Like, again, I think it's healthy to make questions and to ask questions about what actually happened. But what is the fad here? Like, what is the fad? It seems like the right, because these are both technically conservatives, right? Allegedly, from my understanding. This means that there's a split in the right now. And it's almost like there's a split between the MAGA, massaging Trump's you-know-what, and his whole cabinet's you-know-what. And then it's the right that is trying to be rational and trying to be reasonable, but they're coming off as trying to dismiss the other part of the right. And I thought to myself, this is very interesting. This is very intriguing. What exactly is this here? What exactly is going on here? Because it seems like the left is just becoming more and more fortified in of itself, making itself like, if you want to look at history, politically speaking, the strongest ideas were formed under people that were able to get a generalized understanding of a particular ideology and then go all into it and force other people to do so. Like, because with a lot of people on the right, they can disagree and be like, okay, yeah, we can disagree, move on about their day. People on the left, in this hyper sensitive, focused like ideology, I'm not saying it's sensitive in like a derogatory way. I'm just saying that they're very sensitive to their ideas, and they have this like sensory input about their ideas, is what I'm trying to say. I really don't want this to sound derogatory. I'm trying to be as reasonable and rational as possible while also being reasonable and giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, trying to analyze the situation. It seems like they are fortifying themselves, and now the right is like starting to split. And I wonder how everybody in between is like an individualist to some degree. But there's not a lot of these individualists left. And there's not a lot of places for the individualist to lean over on anymore. And that's what I found myself looking at in this Joe Rogan thing. Was I found myself, I would consider myself an individual person. I follow Christ. Christ is the only one that, if I had to affiliate myself with anything, I'm not a Christian, I just follow Christ. For me, it's semantics. But anyway, that's a whole nother story for another time. But I thought to myself, what exactly is this? Because I fear that if there's a continuous spread and disintegration of the system, on the one hand, it's actually really good. There are going to be more people that are thinking for themselves. On the other hand, it's going to just polarize everybody even more than they already are. So it's very fascinating to me. I don't know exactly what is going to be coming of this, but I do know that people need to get prepared and to think for themselves. They need to get prepared for whatever may happen, and they don't really need to be in fear, but they need to be only fearing the Lord. All right? So I hope that this video was useful and insightful for you. Hopefully it gave you something new to think about. And, as I said at the very beginning of this video, I wanted to really do something that, what do the people need right now? What kind of content do people need? So hopefully this was a reasonable and rational analytical approach, while also trying to be as neutral as possible, having a faith in Christ based focused. So with all that being said, peace be with you all. Until next time.